Social. A hand draws a backyard pool and house. 3 people are enjoying a party and 2 more enter and comment on them.
The social model of disability is like a house party, thrown by disabled people for disabled people.
Ain't no party like a crip party, 'cause the crip party don't stop.
Nothing for us without us.
I was born like this. Don't even gotta try.
What is this?
They can dance? They seem happy.
We didn't have anything to do with this.
Still don't.
It's like they have their own culture.
That I'm not even a part of.
Still aren't.
Turns out our identities aren't about you.
And it turns out we're a fourth of the population.
Are they okay?
I don't know. Abel's so weird.
The social model pushes the world towards inclusion, diversity of bodies, and built-in consideration of access requirements. It values the personhood of the individual and the communities in which we live. It shifts the focus away from the individual to the culture of disability. The social model is a movement towards an inclusive future that welcomes everyone.
You could join this party at any time if you stop being weird about it.
Bye.
Social. Jordan Carlos, right gray. Lynn Marie Rosenberg, left gray. Selena Luna, blue. Ryan J. Haddad, pink. Kara Reedy, purple. Matt Frazier, narrator. Lynn Marie Rosenberg, artwork and animation. Script and concept by Kara Reedy and Lynn Marie Rosenberg. Kara Reedy, producer. Jim Lebrecht, audio engineering. Rod Milam, video editor and visual description. Avi Amon, the score. Special thanks to Lawrence Carter Long, Susan Henderson, and Judy Human.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kara Reedy, and I'm the program manager at Disability Media Alliance Project. The video you just saw is something that we've been working on. It's called The Social Model of Disability. It's a little stop motion movie that explains about the culture of disability and how accessibility is really something that everyone should strive for, want, because when a world is accessible, it means that everyone is included. So I wanted to start that video because before I told my story, tonight you're going to hear a lot of stories from Black women, and mine's crosses intersections because I'm Black and I'm disabled. But I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, in a little enclave called University City, which was this weird sort of hippie town in the middle of a very conservative St. Louis. Ferguson is not an aberration. It really is like that. But when I was really young, the only world I knew was University City, which was built by a sort of, I guess, you would call him a visionary, but he was also a little bit of a crook. But he started this town so that people of different socioeconomic statuses could live next door to each other. So the neighborhood was full of giant Victorian mansions next to little cottages. There were apartment buildings, and everybody sort of lived together. But as somewhere around this, I think mid-century, it became a very Jewish neighborhood. And then with sundown laws, and so the Black people that worked there had to leave before the sun went down. But somewhere in the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, the Jewish community decided that they needed to integrate the school. And so they started with one student, a Black woman. And as they opened the doors, then more and more Black people started coming to the neighborhood. And then by the time I showed up in the late 70s, it became, it was already this sort of incubator for creativity. Everywhere we went, there were artists. All of the parents were artists or scientists. We knew how to, all of the kids knew how to throw pots. We all knew how to sing and dance because there were cultural institutions just in this little neighborhood. And my preschool was called Child Grove, and it was attached to a larger school. It was super hippie. There was no playground equipment. They used to just give us the plastic milk carts and milk crates and say, go hang out on the hill. And we'd get in them and roll down the hill in them in the mud and whatever. And they didn't care. And they used to have big blocks. And when we were really little, we could make houses out of these giant blocks. But also we had a lot of freedom within the school. And I used to wander off to the older kids' school rooms. There were tree houses in every room, and I would climb up in the tree house and hang out. So this very free experience. And I'm a little person. I'm disabled. I've been disabled my whole life. I didn't really understand. I knew I was shorter, but I didn't understand stigma around that until much later, because this community that surrounded me didn't make a big deal about it. They just brought up, if I needed an accommodation, they just made it. Like, they were just like, okay, well, Kara's gonna need this to go do this. And then they would just do it. And it was never really any, I didn't notice any blips in my life, where I think a lot of other disabled kids, like, it's made a big deal of, and their parents have to fight for it. But in my little space full of scientists and doctors and creatives, it just wasn't a thing. So I went to public school, and it continued, and the kids were still great until there was a bully. But it was still better than where I ended up after that. My parents are Catholic, and I guess I'm Catholic too. And they sent me to Catholic school. And that's when I first realized that the world was not accommodating or nice or not racist, because my whole experience up until then, Black and white people, Asian people, just all hung out and we all shared. But when I got to Catholic school, I was like, oh, this is different. It's sort of like I experienced St. Louis on a different level. And I really had to start fighting. I don't mean physically fighting, but figuring out how to get out of situations, figuring out how to handle bullies and handle teachers that didn't really get it, and would tell me things like, oh, you can't do that. You're just too short to do that. There was no conversation about accommodations. And, I fought my way through it and embarrassed some teachers. But I will say this, growing up, the first section of my life, preschool through about third grade, was really the most formative time of my life, because it opened my mind to creativity. Everyone I know was creative, and it helped me solve problems, because although they made accommodations, they also taught me how to make accommodations for myself. They taught me how to learn and how to speak for myself. And there was never any coddling, but there was always openness. And that foundation really, I think, has set me up to be who I am today. I'm creative because of those first few years. I understand how to problem solve because of those first few years. And I don't think that's something that every disabled person gets, but I'm very, very happy that I did. So that's my story. And I'm going to bring the next storyteller up, and her name is Nakai Lewis. The title of her story is After the Turn, create a new lane. Nakai Lewis, as a young Black worker in the industry of retail, facing challenges in climbing the corporate ladder from cashier to management. Please welcome Nakai.
Thank you, Kara, so much for that great introduction, and what an amazing story. Hi, everyone. So my name is Nakai, and my story today is, after the term creating a lane. So in the retail industry, I started like when I was 16. I was super passionate and so ready to jump into the world. And I started in a popular drugstore chain, and I worked my way up to, in the cosmetics, photo shop, and all of these things. And I, little by little, I started learning, different parts of the store, and I realized like, oh my God, this is something, like I'm passionate, I want to do. So by the time like 2 years later, I was about 18 years old, and I was, just like, okay, what is the next step? Like, I think I know mostly everything there is to know almost in the store. So my store manager recommended that, you know what, you should apply for the, assistant manager program. I'm like, wow, I'm 18, but okay. So I did that. And when I did that, I really realized that, this was my like leadership role. I remember some of my colleagues or my employees, they would ask me to go on break. And, some of them were 50 or 60, and they're asking me, an 18-year-old, they're like, Miss Lewis, can I go on break? I'm like, absolutely, you could go on break. I was always a nice manager. So I really realized that, being in there, and I learned every different part of the retail store. So I have a special passion, especially for the cosmetics department and working with different, what you call like, Mylars and different settings, because like example, like when Revlon has a new product, someone has to put it out. So we are that person that, takes the product and sets it up. So I realized that through this, that I think that if I learned everything, I could really move up and maybe, have my own store one day. I was really excited about this because this is my first job. I've never had, a job before. And I was working, I had a lot of different types of people that were my employees and, in management, whether, they were all different colors, shapes, ages, sizes. So I had to learn really quick, how to adapt and work with all different types of people. And it came up where I could actually have, I used to go to different stores and actually set up the retail stores at like age 18 and spending hours upon hours working with different store managers, setting up departments, opening up new stores. Like if they asked me to do something, I was like, yes, me please, I'll do it. I'll put the overtime in. I'm doing 60, 70, whatever hours it takes, I'm doing it. So, there was one point in that career where there was another white guy who's about the same age as me. We kind of sounded around the same, and I realized that he was actually getting paid. We had a conversation on money, and I realized that he was actually getting paid like $3.50 more than me. So I was like, okay, but we're doing the same job. You're assistant manager, I'm assistant manager. We should kind of like be the same, like, because we kind of started out as cashier. So I didn't really quite understand. He was like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just getting paid more than you. I was like, okay. I was like, well, no, maybe I need to try a different position or something. So that's why I was like, all right. Well, they said, hey, there's another open position that we think that you would be great for. So my store manager really recommended that I applied. So I had recommendations from the store manager. I had several other stores here in New Jersey that was like, you know what, she's amazing. She comes, she does everything she's supposed to do. She's worked with our employees in different stores. She sets up the store. She does overtime. I'm unpacking, truckloads of merchandise and putting it up and organizing the stores and making sure everything's clean. Like I'm doing everything. So I was then promoted to executive assistant manager now by like, 19. So now I'm like, $50,000 plus I'm 19 and I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm winning. This is really how it should be, right? So it's like, okay, so another job opened up and this was for district manager. Like I would basically be in charge of all the stores, working with all the assistant managers, working with everybody I'm kind of already working with. I was already working with 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, different stores. So I'm like, this is easy. I'll just get the recommendations. And I was like, you know what? I really want to ace this interview. So I said, let me go ahead and create. So I implemented this program into the beauty department, which will make it a lot easier for the employees to do their job, to service the clientele, and just to be, the best person that they needed to be at that time while, making sales. And then my sales in these departments were increasing. They were seeing, more revenue. So the stores are making money. I'm like, yeah, and I just implemented this program. So I'm super excited, right? So they're like, all right. So they're like, we got you an interview. I'm like, you did? Oh my God, this is great. This is great. I'm super excited, right? Ready, right? And then they're like, okay, so it's between you and one other girl. I'm like, who is this girl? Who is this? I mean, seriously, I thought I had this. Like, who am I competing against? So, it happened to be she came in with her, with her degree, and she was more of the corporate type. And, of course, it got into, I guess, where, she was she's a different color than me, right? So let's just say, so I was like, oh man, she's coming in, she's got her blonde hair and her fancy bags, and here I am, 19 years old. So how am I gonna compete with her? So I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna just, I think I got this. I got all recommendations. I'm working with the stores. I'm putting in the hours. I've worked from the bottom up. I know that I am supposed to just, this is me. This is it. And this job is going to pay me $100,000 a year. And I was like, so excited. So I did the interview. I came outside and like, thank you, Miss Lewis. We really loved your ideas. They were really, really, intentional. You're very creative. And you're super ambitious. The guy with the corporate suit. And I was like, okay, so did I get the job? Because they were going to tell us right there in the spot. I'm like, unfortunately, we're going to have to go with the other candidate because, I think for this particular position, you need a little bit more time. And mind you, she hasn't worked in none of these stores. She hasn't done what I have done. She hasn't sweated and put all these bullets out there and like worked with everyone the way that I have, right? So I was like, so am I getting the job? And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Like, it's going to go to her this time. And I was like, wow. I was like, okay, all right. Oh my God. So I was super distraught, I really felt like, oh my goodness, like how could this happen to me? Like I thought I had this in the bag. It was in the bag. Like, who took my bag? I mean, seriously. I was like, okay, you know what? I was like, this is not, I don't know. I didn't even know where to begin because I was like, I thought this was how it's supposed to work. Like you work, you get promoted. You put in hours, you get promoted, you move up the ladder. I was like, and I was working with everybody. So I was really distraught. And I realized, you know what? I don't think that being in this retail business, and if this is how it is, like if that's what it is, I don't think I should do this. I really don't. So I started going back to, I was in college. So I started like, just kind of focusing more on that aspect and, seeing what I could do in the business world. And then I started creating like my own business. That's how I became an entrepreneur. And I started there and I said, you know what? At that point, I was like, I'm just going to go for my dreams, just forget everything. I'm just going to go in. And that's what I did. So, after things turn for you, you want to create that lane. You never want to let any disappointment be like, your distraction of what you're trying to do in life. You just want to make it so that you don't stop believing in your abilities and what you're capable of and just go after your dreams. So thank you very much. That was my story.
Hi, it's me again. Thank you, Nikai. That was a great story. I think we've all experienced a little bit of that. The next story is from L. Johnson, and the title of it, All Things Being Equal. And here she comes.
Hi, I think you can hear me now. Hopefully everyone can hear me now. Thanks so much. My name is Elle Johnson, and I'm a TV writer and showrunner and executive producer. I've been working as a television writer for the last 20-something years, primarily doing cop shows, but other character-driven shows as well. And I most recently finished working on a television series for Amazon called Bosch. And I also worked on a limited series with Octavia Spencer called Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. So I was really grateful for the opportunity to consider equality, because when I stopped to think about it, I realized that I didn't really know what equality looked like. And I was racking my brain trying to remember my experiences with equality, or rather inequality, in my life. And I remembered one experience that I had working on a television show where, similar to Nikai, I realized that the guy in the exact same position as I was, with the same title, doing the same job, was getting paid more than me. And my thoughts of complaining about it were soon wiped away as I inventoried for myself how much better a writer I thought he was than I, more naturally talented, a faster writer, maybe a more inventive storyteller. And that this was, looking back on it, I realized this was perhaps my way of kind of avoiding the confrontation that I knew I should have, but that I didn't think would go the way I wanted, that I was kind of convincing myself that he deserved to be paid more, so that I wouldn't have to confront a situation that I felt like I couldn't actually change. And thinking about this kind of opened the floodgates to me of other instances of dealing with equality or inequality. I remembered how early on in my career, I decided to leave the talent agency that was representing me. And they proceeded to tell me that I would be sorry, that others who had left had never worked again. And they continued to say that one of the only reasons that I got work was because I was Black and because I was a woman, as if pointing this out to me would somehow make me want to stay with the agency. But as I reflected on this back then and even now, I realized the truth is that I've only ever been hired because I was Black or a woman or both. That in many ways I was filling slots that needed to be filled. I was checking off boxes. Because usually on a television show, there would maybe be a Black character or a female character in the main cast that they felt needed to be serviced with an authentic voice. And that would be filled by one person. You know, you typically, I found early on in my career, especially working on cop shows and procedurals, I would be the only woman in the room and the only person of color. And that you would never kind of see other people that looked like you. There would only ever be one. There would never be another one. I was thinking about how early on in my career, again, there was a particular show where one of the Black actors specifically asked for a writer of color to be added to the staff. And, you know, this actor had been on the show for a while and had gained the trust and you know, the ear of the people in charge. And I was really grateful for the opportunity just to fill that slot. It was one of many crime shows that I'd worked on. But even though more than 85% of the people in Americans' prisons are people of color, it feels like on television, they make up less than 2% of the stories being told, as if somehow, you know, those stories are less worthy than telling stories about the typical demographic of a super rich white person who murders someone or gets into trouble. So when I was asked to join the show, I made it a point in my head to tell stories only about Black characters. I made sure that all of the episodes that I wrote involved Black characters and would have predominantly Black cast. And I felt like, you know, this was kind of my duty to do this. And it was my honor to do this, to tell stories about people that I wanted to see reflected on television. And I remember on one episode where I managed to make every single character in the cast a person of color. And as we were casting, sitting there with the director and other producers, you know, at the end of the day, looking at all of the headshots of the people that we had cast and kind of looking at who we had, I remember the director on this particular episode just made an offhanded comment that this episode sure did have a lot of Black actors in it. And I wondered if he ever would have said that, looking at the headshots of any of the other episodes, would he ever had said, boy, this episode sure does have a lot of white actors in it? And I realized probably not. I realized that had I not been there, this disparity and inequality might never have been noticed before. So I've been grateful for the opportunities that I've had in some small way to level the playing field. And as I said, I know for most of my career, when I've been hired, it's because I am Black and because I am a woman. That's for the first time I've been hired. By the second or third or fourth time that I'm hired by these same producers and showrunners on other shows, it's because they've worked with me before and they know how good I actually am. And it's hard for me to kind of say that out loud because I feel like it's easy for me as a creative person to see my flaws and my faults. And that's when I kind of kick things into high gear in terms of working twice as hard to get twice as good, so opportunities will come to me. And I acknowledge this inequality, that this is kind of an old trope, you know, the idea of having to work twice as hard to get half as much. I feel like I have internalized this to a degree where I don't resent it. You know, I feel like that's just the way it is. And sometimes I'm even wearing that as a badge of honor. I feel like, oh, it makes me stronger. It makes me a better writer, even if I'm not being appropriately compensated for it. So in a bizarre kind of way, I feel like looking at inequality, I feel like I am equally confident and insecure. I at once know my worth and at the same time feel like I'm not valued in the marketplace. So about 4 or 5 years ago, something happened in my career. Suddenly, there were a lot more projects about people of color, Black people in particular, and women and minority showrunners were in demand, and there just weren't enough of us to fill those slots because we'd not been cultivated to the same degree. We'd not been given the same opportunities. But suddenly, after 20 plus years in the industry, I finally had multiple offers to run shows, but only certain shows. I wasn't being asked to run shows that featured white leads, only shows that were telling quote unquote Black stories. And while it's great to be able to finally tell our stories, I want to be able to tell all stories. Even though I feel like I've been hired for the most part to service Black characters on a show, I'm writing for all characters on these shows. And since my career has been largely writing cop shows and procedurals, I have to acknowledge that if I weren't writing for largely white men, I wouldn't have a career. So this brought me back to the question of, is this equality? You know, this still feels kind of like separate, but not really equal. And these days I have a number of white writer friends who complain about how hard it is for them to get staff. Now, I don't know how true it is. It seems to me that there's still a hell of a lot of shows out there that are featuring mainly white characters, but I'm sympathetic because they're experiencing what I've experienced, and I don't wish that on anyone. As many of the Black activists have graciously said in this moment of social justice reckoning, we want equality, not revenge. So what the hell is equality? Equality is when anyone can write anything because everything is being written and has an equal chance of getting on air, when all of our stories are considered valid, when we all just want to be known and seen for who we are. and not as an exception or an outlier. Equality is when we can tell all of our specific stories and recognize what is universally human and relatable in all of them, that we're all here having a human experience. And I feel like now is the moment to demand equal treatment, equal time. Right now, the pendulum has to swing wide and far before it can come back to rest in a place of balance. And I feel like we're going through an uncomfortable period of these conversations and kind of acknowledging what hasn't been said and done before, but that hopefully openly talking about these things and really pushing things to the limit will get us eventually to a place of equality and ultimately balance.
Thank you, Elle. That was amazing. And next we have Kimberly Gilgore's, the title of her story is The Game of Life.
Great evening, everyone. My name is Kimberly Gilgers, and I have to just say, I was sitting here listening to the stories so far, and I don't know about anyone else, but I'm definitely moved and motivated by what my fellow sisters here are talking about. I've been taking some notes feverishly as well. You know, what are some of the key takeaways? And so I wanted to just share my story with you all briefly as well. So, you know, my story is called The Game of Life because I remember as a child, I was raised by a single mom, and my mother would play this game with me. It was called The Game of Life. And just to give you a little history about it, if you didn't know, The Game of Life is actually a game that is the oldest board game in US history. It was developed in 1860, and the whole premise of the game was to walk through life on a board around all the different things that someone could experience in their lifetime, from college all the way through to retirement. And on this board, you experience things like buying a home and saving and having children. And I loved it because it was the only thing one of the games that we played a lot. And I always would marvel how my mother would weave these stories into this board game, not realizing that she was teaching me life lessons along the way. And The Game of Life, one of the things that I took away from that is that life is like a game. There are different things that we experience and that we go through. And it's about one, being prepared for them as best one can, and also taking from those experiences and learning from them for the next part or the next space, if you will, on the board, right, in the game of life. So my story began when we moved to Long Island. So I'm from New York, and my family moved into a neighborhood where there were no other people that looked like us. In fact, the way we were able to purchase our home is that my father's friend, who was an attorney, represented that he was buying this home, but it was actually my family, and we moved in. Luckily, the neighborhood embraced our family for the most part. And very early on, my mother found herself on her own. And I watched and I looked how we lived a certain way in this same neighborhood, on the same block, and everybody else lived a vastly different life. And it just baffled me, like, why was it so different? Why was I wearing, clothes that my mother had to sew just to keep together, and everyone else was getting new clothes and, wearing designer things? And so what I realized was that I needed to go to work and I needed to figure out how money worked. And that's what I actually did. My first corporate job was with a very large investment bank in Manhattan on Wall Street. And listening to Elle talk about not pushing back on the disparities that she was seeing, and listening to Nakai talk about the disparities she saw, I sometimes have to ask myself, was I blind? Because when I started working in the investment field, I was the only Black female in the whole group of men working in investments. I came in with very specific job. My job was to automate a manual process that they had. And I put up and dealt with so many things that I really thought was normal, where, told to go get coffee and told, no, you don't need to know that. That's too much for you to handle. And one of the things that I realized during that time is what sustained me was that my goals, my objectives were far bigger than any obstacle that could be placed in front of me. My goal was to make enough money, to learn about how money worked so that my family, my mother and I, didn't have to struggle as I saw that we were doing versus what I saw with my neighbors who were going on vacations, who were getting new cars. I remember my mom and I together, I learned how to work on a car as a young kid because we had one car. We had to figure out, how to fix it and all those kinds of things. So when I had the opportunity and learned that I could share my story about equality, I was very moved. And I was moved because I look at where we are now. Elle talked about the pendulum swinging wide and far, right? So that we could get to a place where we really have more of equality across all spectrums. And when I look at what we're going through now and the movement of women and what we're fighting for, not just here, let's not forget our sisters abroad, right, who are in many countries going through major tumultuous times. But when I look at all of that and I look at what I went through, I'm humbled because the things that we are fighting for and the things that we are making issue about and raising the bar on are things when I was coming up, we would have never thought to do that. Or maybe I just never knew that that was an option. I came up at a time where I thought if a man called you whatever he called you or treated you a kind of way or made accusations or had inappropriate conversation with you, that was just part of what it was to get to where you needed to be. And so I really am impressed with where we've come. But to Elle's point, and as Nakai shared in her story, we have a long way to go, ladies. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think being able to share our stories about what we've been through is very, very important so that people know that they're not alone, so that women know that there are people that have walked this path before them. And maybe we didn't have as many options as exist now today, but we had experiences that can help the next generation continue this movement forward. I remember a very specific incident. I was probably at my third investment bank. And so it was a little bit more diverse, not much. There were just more women, but there was still no one that looked like me. And at the time, I was managing a group of people from men and women. We had about 3 women. 2 of them were more in an administrative role. I was in a management role. And then we had a lot of gentlemen that worked with us as well. And I remember this very specific incident. We were sitting around the boardroom table. All the walls were glass. This was in Lower Manhattan. I could see right out to the Statue of Liberty. And we were talking about a specific project that we needed to get completed. And during that conversation, everyone is sharing their ideas. And my job was to help collect all the ideas and then put them together in a project that we were all going to collectively work on. And everyone shared their ideas. And then it came to me. And, as I was moderating the whole meeting as well, I picked up some of the key points. And then I talked about 1 or 2 things that I thought we needed to include in the mix. And I remember very distinctly, to my left was a gentleman who's been with us, was with us for quite some time. And as I was talking, I visibly watched him get redder and redder. And, maybe I was naive. I really couldn't understand why he was getting red. And at first, I really thought that maybe he just wasn't feeling well. But what I realized very quickly as he went from red to shaking was that he was angry. And he was angry. What I learned was he was angry because he felt like the position that I had and the direction I was taking the project in was something he should have been able to do. And he could not contain himself. And he stood up from the table and he picked up a chair and he threw this chair in my general direction. So if I was sitting at the head of the table, it was to my left, the chair landed to my right in the corner. And we ended the meeting, and I remember distinctively going to HR saying, this is unacceptable, something has to be done. You know, here is what occurred. And we were brought into a room together, myself, this gentleman, HR, and I recounted what occurred very calmly. And two things came out of that meeting. One was, well, was he really throwing it at you? Maybe it just slipped. I don't know how a chair that is raised above your head can slip, but maybe it just slipped. And the other thing that was shared with me is that I was too sensitive and that I needed to be a stronger individual to deal in the workplace. So I share this story because while we don't see things happen, at least I hope not, in that same scenario where people are throwing things, the hostility still remains. And as we're going through life, we have to understand the experiences that we have. They should make us stronger, but we have to continue to fight for the respect that we deserve in every place, whether it's the workplace, whether it's in the home, whether it's in the academia, in the schools. We must continue to fight for that equality because not only do we deserve it, we have so much to offer. I'm encouraged with what I'm seeing happen both in all different areas here in the United States and abroad. But ladies, we have a lot of work to do. And it's my hope and my goal that my story and the stories that you're hearing of my fellow panelists will help to inspire and encourage you all to continue the fight, to band together and to be able to make a difference, not only now, but for future generations. Kara, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. That was amazing. And for our final story, it's Kim Roxy, and the title of her story is From Being Labeled at Risk to Raking Risks.
Hey everyone. Hey everyone. OMG. I am fired up. How about that? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I'm just over here snapping when I'm hearing our sisters on here telling their stories, never giving up, holding up the banner and taking a stand and sharing with us so we can have the wisdom to do the same, have the strategy to do the same, and be able to see ourselves and know that we're not invisible. When you hear these stories, don't you just feel seen, right? You feel seen? You feel seen? Anybody else feeling it? Anybody else snapping their fingers? Oh my goodness. So I am, I'm like, when I'm on this camera, when I'm in front of everyone, and if you've ever read my bio, I am the founder of Lamique Beauty, which is a clean color cosmetic brand. And when I think about being a business owner and what it takes to lead a business, it takes a risk taker. But I'll tell you, it came out of a really dark place for me to be labeled at risk. I was 16. And when you are labeled at risk at 16, I'll tell you what they're referring to. Because I remember asking my teacher at my school, why are they calling us at risk? Why do y'all keep saying these at risk students? Why are y'all labeling, like, why are y'all calling us that? And she said, you're at risk for not becoming a productive citizen. You're at risk for ending up in jail. And I was like, why? Because we made a mistake? Oh, I forgot to tell you guys. I was kicked out of high school at 16. And I had to go to an alternative school. And while I was inside of this alternative school, that's when I asked that teacher that question. See, Black girls are 6 times more likely to be expelled from school, 3 times more likely to be suspended, and 4 times more likely to be arrested than white girls. The issues of school push out leads to learning loss and ultimately incarceration. And that's that at-risk label that I was given at 16. Now, I remember sitting in my corner in my alternative school, working on my lesson, and I just couldn't get over the fact that they had such low standards for our future based on a past mistake that we made. And I remember talking to another teacher in there, and she said, I want to do an exercise with everyone. Write down your 1-year goal, your 5-year goal, and your 10-year goal. And she asked us to do this exercise about a day after I heard that we were being called at risk and that our future was not one that was full of prosperity and good things. And I was devastated. And so I remember saying to my teacher, how can I write down my goals if y'all don't think we're going anywhere? If you don't, if you think that I'm not going to be productive. And she said, why don't you write down your goal and you make it up to yourself to become what you put down as your goal. She said, Kim, it's up to you to prove that. And I remember writing down my goal for 1 year. And it was to graduate high school and go to college, even though everyone around me told me I was not going to be able to get accepted into college because of the fact that I was expelled from high school. And I took then, and then for my 5-year goal, I put down I wanted to be successful because I didn't know what I really wanted to do as an adult, but I just knew I wanted to be successful because I had to prove, or I had to show that I was not going to become the unproductive citizen that they had labeled us as. And so I applied to college. I applied to Clark Atlanta University. My parents had took me out there to visit the school, and I fell in love with Atlanta, Georgia. I'm from Houston, Texas. And I got accepted, even though they told me I wasn't going to be able to. And while there, that's where I started to work at a makeup counter in the mall, just as a part-time job. And when I got ready my senior year to graduate from college, I had worked at the makeup counter the entire time, and I had fell in love with making women feel good about themselves. And I remember talking to my manager, like, I'm getting ready to graduate. She said, where are you going to get a job at? Where have you put in your resume? And I was like, that's the problem. I've been working part-time at this makeup counter. I have not had an internship. She said, Kim, no worries. She said, you sell more makeup than me. You sell more makeup than anybody in this store. She was like, you can open up your own makeup store. And when she said that, it's almost like I got permission to be risky. I got permission to continue to take those big risks, just like I took that risk applying for college, even though they told me I wasn't gonna be able to get in. So I started saving up some money. This is my second semester of my senior year of college. My mom gave me $500. I saved up $9,500 and I opened up my own makeup store in the mall at 21 years old. And while I was there, about a month into being open, I get a letter in the mail for a career day. And it said, our students saw your career in the mall, and they really would like you to come out to the career day and talk about how you got into that career. And I was like, oh, a career day, I don't mind. I love to go out to the school to go talk to the kids. It'd be my first time ever doing it. And so I remember that day, I pulled out that letter to see where the address was of the school. It was like a couple weeks later, and I pulled it out and I'm looking at the address, and I'm like, okay, I know what that is. And I was like, that address looks familiar. But so I just I'm driving, I get on the street, I drive up to the campus. I'm like, this is the alternative school that I went to. So I go inside the school. I said, you guys having a career day here? Yes. We're so excited you're here. They have other students there. I get inside the school. I'm like, are they playing a prank on me? I'm like, what is going on? I said, do you know I went to this school? They said, are you kidding me? I said, no. When I told them I went to the school, I explained, because they were explaining to the other professionals that were there for the career day how the school worked, because the school basically worked like a jail, like a juvenile, the way it was on lockdown in different sections. And I was telling them, oh, I know exactly how this school works. And when they found out I went there, I was like, how did you guys find out about me? They said, no, the students went to the mall, they saw your store, and they said that they wanted to own a store like yours and be in the beauty industry like you one day. They didn't know you went to this same alternative school. So they took me around the whole school. I spoke to like every classroom because they said they never had anybody come to career day who had been in the same shoes as the students that attended the school. So from that moment on, I realized that even my mistake at 16 was going to be a misstep that someone else would take that would land them in the same place. And that the 5 years later, Kim, that I wrote down that goal of I just want to be successful would show up in the form of a business owner just 5 years later. And now, creating my own makeup line from just having a makeup store to now my products being in the largest beauty specialty retailer in the country, Ulta Beauty, and my products being on the virtual shelves of Ulta. I know for a fact that even when you mess up, even when they count you out, someone else will be coming behind you and they would have done the same thing. But because you survived, because you tried again, because you were resilient, because you wiped your tears and kept going anyway, they will know that they can too. Thank you so much. And keep being a risk taker.
Thank you, Kim. That was amazing. So this is our question portion of our discussion time, which is my favorite part because even though I told the story about my childhood, because I feel like there's always these places where we don't necessarily talk about what support systems made it possible for us to battle through these things. And so I wanted to kind of give that perspective. And I want to with this discussion, I really want to talk about, like, when we talk about equality, we never really get granular with it and talk about how much more effort we have to do and what that costs us in time and energy, and which I just think is a good thing to talk about. Because Nikai, you had to go battle for equal pay. But how much did that, if we could all just go around and talk about like times where that took up time, like creative time, and give an estimate of how much time you think that's taken off of your productivity, like, and like that's emotional as well as just time, like explaining yourself. If anybody wants to weigh in.
Absolutely. Kara, it took, I would say, a couple years, because, it affected me, ongoing within life. Like, I really didn't understand, the dynamics of it. And there was a part of the story I forgot to mention, was that the woman, she came up to me, the one who got my position, and she said, "I really love what you've been doing here with the place, and I really enjoy, I think," she said, "whatever you implemented, we're going to keep that. You don't mind, right?" And I was like, well, no, I mean, what can I do, So think about that even after I put in all that time and effort, she still took my ideas and ran and implemented in all the stores anyway. But I ended up getting a settlement lawsuit, because there was a lawsuit against them. So I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, and for me, it really took an emotional toll on me. I really felt like, you talk about support systems. Well, I certainly didn't have any in the companies that I was working with. And, honestly, when I would come home and talk to my mom about it, as much as she wanted to be a support system for me, it was really challenging for her, because I was doing things that she never thought could be done. My mother grew up in an era where you went to high school and then you got married and you were a housewife. So she really couldn't relate. So I don't know that I really had a lot of a support system around it. It was like you just kind of had to go through it. But I can tell you now that at this age, and that was 20 some odd years ago, I still feel the effects of it. When I've worked in the corporate world for many years, and then ultimately I walked away because I felt like I wasn't able to be the best version of myself. And I went independent, and I now have my own business. But every now and again, those voices creep back up. You're not good enough. You can't do this. I'm still in an industry that's dominated by males. And by women that don't look like me. So, when you talk about the time, the effort, it's still an onion I'm unpeeling right now. I'm doing a lot of work on myself from a personal development perspective, because I realize that all of these things that we've all experienced, they affect us, and they sit like in the recesses of our life. And then they show up in the most unexpected ways, where you feel like, a great opportunity comes. I listen to you, Kim, and kudos to you landing Ulta, right? And like, if someone came to me and said, you're amazing and we want you in our stores, if that's what I was doing, I think I probably have that voice in the back of my head telling me, I don't know if you can really do this. Maybe you should just stay back here. That's a continued issue, at least for me. I don't know about anyone else, that I continue to work on.
No, I definitely agree with that. I feel like, constantly having to check in with myself and talk to myself about, I'm more prepared than I think I am. I have more skills than I think I do. And also the issue of, feeling like you have to work twice as hard to get half as much, feeling like, okay, this is my burden, but I'm just going to do it. I'm going to put more effort into something, when you realize that there are, kind of other people who I don't want to say that they're skating, but they're able to put energy into numerous other things, you know, to spread their opportunity far and wide. Whereas I have this sense of like, everything I do has to be perfect. And so you invest so much energy into getting something perfect, when for other people, it seems like perfection is not the standard. Just having an idea and going with it, you know, allows them to take more shots than I would take, because I feel like the one shot that I'm going to take has to be exceptional versus taking many different shots and seeing what sticks. So it's, you know, you kind of, in a sense, it feels like you're losing time because you're investing so much time in so fewer things, because you feel like I've got to be perfect to get ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, Black women are overprepared. Black women are overqualified. Black women are over the greatest debt, and bamboozled into thinking that we're not. If you find a Black woman that is at the top of the game, doing whatever, this is probably the most brilliant person you ever meet in your life, because what she hasn't had to overcome to get to that point. So that's the reason why I love being in the beauty industry, because a part of me, I have this quote that says, beauty is revealed and not applied. You cannot make a Black woman smarter. She is the most degreed right now. She is the fastest growing entrepreneur right now. You can't mess with her. But all you try to do is make her think that she is not what she is. And so that is the biggest trick that's out there. And so anytime I get a chance to meet, you know, because we have a lot of Black girl magic who wear my line and my cosmetics and I interact with, I'm just like, man, these are the most brilliant women the most brilliant people that you will ever meet, because most will never have to conquer what she did to get to where she is.
Yeah, definitely. Funny, I worked at CNN. Kimberly's niece and I used to work together, and hi, Amanda. So a lot of people don't know this, but I was a journalist, and I produced documentaries, and I wrote, and I did all this stuff. I never called myself a journalist the entire time I was at CNN, and I was there 10 years.
Wow.
Because they made me think I wasn't.
Wow.
And they used to say things to me all the time, like, well, you're not really like doing it. And because I was sort of on this different tier, like it didn't process that I was actually doing all the same things they were doing, but actually at a higher level with more people, more times a day. That it took me to leave when I went, what? Wait a minute.
Right.
You guys aren't even that good. Like, oh my gosh. But it took that, but I think that takes time off of your success though, because you're so busy kind of believing that you aren't this person. And so that everyone's better than you and that you shouldn't try. I mean, not that I didn't continue trying, obviously I continued trying, but the like you mentioned, Kimberly, the thoughts in the head where you're like, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And you just keep hearing it. Even while you're doing it, they're still going off and you're like, oh, shut up. It's hard. It's hard to get them to shut up.
Yeah.
So also I feel like Black women, we find each other at work and we look out for each other in ways like it's almost like this coded language. And sometimes I'm just like, Did you all have at some point in your life like a Black woman at work that like looked out for you in ways that no one else can? I was lucky at CNN. I had like a group of Black women that where we would all like your niece Amanda was actually one of them because she pulled me out of so many jams and I'd be like, Amanda, help me. But did you all make those like, and sometimes it's the lady that works in the cafeteria. Like it is not, it doesn't have to be like at your same job title. Did you all have that at some point?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think part of the issue is just working on the types of shows that I was working on. I was always the only one, not only just the only woman, the only person of color. So you're representing in a room full of white men, and the next person of color or woman to you is a support staff person who, is not on your same level in terms of the job that you're doing, but definitely in terms of looking out and hearing the conversations that you might not be hearing. There were definitely people who were saying, oh, this is what's being said, or let me tell you what I overheard. And that's invaluable just in terms of getting a leg up on what's going on around you, because you're not always going to hear some of those conversations. And for me, I always felt that, I really wanted to help the support staff and raise them up as much as I could. And in my industry, in television writing, if you're a good showrunner, you will try to raise up the writer's PA and the script coordinator and the writer's assistant. And so I'm always looking to those people as people who I think, well, you can be a writer. You're here not to get coffee or not to take notes. You're not going to do that indefinitely. At some point, you're going to be a writer. And at some point, it's my job to help you get there. So I feel like, looking around at the people who are surrounding you to try and give more opportunities and to give more information to help them get where they need to go. I think that's definitely something that's helped me. And I feel like you got to pay that back.
Yeah, I was going to say that's really powerful, because there was one young woman, well, actually she was older than me, when I first started working at one of the investment houses. And I remember distinctly the second day there, the supervisor said to me, you see that lady, you stay away from her. She's bad news. She was the only other Black woman in the unit. And what I realize now is she wanted to keep us apart. And we became quick friends. In fact, that's over 30 years ago. We just talked the other day. She's retired. I've long left there. So they tried to keep us apart, but it didn't work. But, what you're talking about is so true, right? So I was what they would have considered to be on the inside track around what was going on, and they were trying to ostracize her. And I was able to shield her from what they were trying to do to her, because I was, quote, on the inside hearing, and she was the subject of all the animosity and the things that were trying to layer against her. So to your point, and she actually was a support system for me, whether she realized it or not, because being older than me, she was able to help me in many areas. So it wasn't just about work, being a woman and working and then having a family at home. That balance, that dynamic is so challenging. And she was able to guide me around how to deal with the dissatisfaction that my husband had, because I was at the point where I was making the same amount of money as he was, and that became a huge problem in my life. But to your point, it is about how can we be role models? I listened to what Kim has done and what Nakia has done. How can we be role models for that next generation, right? I love, Kara, that you spoke about how we do come together, right? We whether it's overtly or without even saying it, we come together to support each other, to say, hey, Kim, did you know this and this is going on? You should be talking to that person. Or Nakai, this one is trying to take your ideas. Maybe you don't want to be so forthcoming with them so that they don't have the ability to steal, your creativity. But yeah, we've got to stick together and come together.
I also think that's a narrative that certainly in Hollywood, the idea of women not helping each other, it's a narrative that I think a lot of men like to put forward, that, oh, women don't work well together, or they'll be gossiping or sniping at each other. And that really honestly has not been my experience at all. And I feel like that's something, Kimberly, like you were saying, they try to separate you. It's like a way to try to keep us apart, or a way to kind of put in our heads, oh, you shouldn't be working together. But I don't think that's our experience. I feel like for me, I've always been surrounded by women who wanted to help me, or who I've wanted to help. And you go out of your way to make sure that they will be successful.
Yeah.
I mean, women really are the only people that any moves that I've ever made, it's because a woman has like flipped a switch and been like, just go. Because whenever you go to, like for me, whenever I went to dudes to ask them stuff, they were always like, yeah, I don't, and like, and you're like, so you're going, yeah, I think so. And you're like, and later on, I realized that when they say I think so, it's just no. Like it's no, don't ask them again, because I think so means no. Because when I saw the women doing it, when I would ask a woman to do it and they would just do it and then it would be done, right. Like, oh, it wasn't actually that difficult. You just didn't want to.
Yeah.
Which I also think is sort of the head game that they play in these companies too, is that they make it like, oh, it's so difficult to get over that line. Yeah, because like there's 30 papers and like then I got to go to a judiciary, and you're like, what? And they're, yeah, 2 hours later, they're, and then some other guy goes up and then it's like they skip from PA to like senior writer in 6 months. So it's possible. Yeah. I also wanted to talk about, like, I feel we've all talked about kind of having to be the best at something, and it's because we're always teetering. Like, I don't know, I know it's not in our heads because it's definitely out there, but like where we're always teetering on the edge of not being good enough to be in the room. And it's not, we're great, like it's not us, but the perception of us is that we're always teetering on the edge. Like one mistake, just like Kim, you were talking about in school, you made a mistake and they literally wrote you off. They were like, well, she made a 16-year-old mistake, so you know what happens after that. Whereas like, like I went to school with some white kids that were just bad. Like bad. And no one ever was like, these kids are at risk. They're like, we're gonna take your car keys away and you lock the liquor cabinet. Like, but we're like, it's prison. Like immediately you head to prison, guys, because you're being 16. So, but I think it carries on through like jobs and stuff. How do you manage that pressure? Or do you just, like, how do you shut that down? Because you have to shut that down in order to keep moving forward. But how do you get past it in order to do that? Like, what are your coping mechanisms? Do you talk to yourself? Do you, like, well, I mean, like, how do you do it?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Kim.
No, go ahead, Nikki. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I guess for coping mechanisms, I would say just, apparel, definitely looking good, walking in that office, looking spiffy, that always helps a woman, you know, great hair, great, you know, makeup and nails and bright colors and the handbag, you know. And also just like adding to your skill set. You know, I try to really, you know, help women and make sure that you are adding and you're learning so many different things so that when you're in these rooms with these men or whoever it may be, that you stand out, you know, and you're actually like being someone who can be remembered. I was going to also mention that, you know, also in the networking game, like I've noticed as like you said, being a woman in the room full of men, and you stand out and there's that one girl over there, and it's like, hey, oh my God, there's another female here. You know, you're super like charged up, right? And it's just about like, you know, us women just, you know, just sometimes just get out there, you know, and just, you know, get into these places where women are normally not there. You know, and just be a voice and show up as your best self. Ladies, don't forget, show up as your best self. It never fails.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I was just about to say that like Nakai is right. And see, I'm kind of happy it happened to me when it did, because all they did was just create. I took the label and then made it my own. And so really what they did was create a monster. So, you know, I went from, you know, like, that's why I'm like, you know, it happened at the right time. When I got to see that as a young person and sort of see what you said, Kara, like just the stark difference. I was a varsity cheerleader. I was, so like me getting kicked out wasn't like this long road to do, you know, to going down a black hole. I grew up playing the piano. I was the accompanist to the choir. I was the keyboardist to the jazz band. So this was not a girl just walking around, you know, this is somebody who got into an altercation, and then first altercation, and then it's just like, boom, bye, see you later, you know, kind of thing. And so when you start to look at the statistics around it, and you start to look at the prison to pipeline, that's a real situation, you know what I'm saying? And that's something that almost became me. Like I almost got caught right up in there, just that easy. And how many of our cousins and brothers and sisters have just gotten caught right up in there? Because you go from one mistake, you may make one more, then it's just like, oh, it's a wrap, you know, it's a wrap for this person. And so the pressure that you talk about, I feel that pressure a lot, just as an entrepreneur on its own, right? You feel a lot of pressure. But what I've decided is joy is my greatest act of resistance. You're gonna get joy all day long. You're gonna get, like, I have a Friday night live show I do on Facebook, and it is a party, and I'm going out to sell more makeup I sell a lot of stuff on there, but I have a party. I play music. I don't care what kind of week I had. I don't care who done stuck to me the wrong way. I'm gonna get on there on Friday night and have a good time, because it's my resistance, right? It's my joy. And to be honest, as a people, and especially as a Black woman, when I still have joy in the face of all this, I'm actually looking at them saying, I don't care, and having a good old time. You know what I mean? Like that's my pressure release. My pressure release is this Black ain't gonna crack. Who said something? This Black ain't gonna crack. I'm gonna have this joy, right? And we gonna keep it going because our ancestors did. Right. My grandparents did, you know, and that's my thing. So really, they created a monster. I went chasing, you know, I took the at risk and started taking risks, and I'm a very risky woman.
I love that you took the at risk and started taking risks. That's amazing.
Beautiful. I was going to say, one of the things that I do is I whenever I see adversity coming, or I find myself in the midst of adversity, and it's not always so easy, I have to remind myself, but I've recorded myself saying, when things are coming against you, it's because something amazing is on its way. And adversity and people, you know, we call them the haters. they don't show up if you're not doing anything. If you're sitting back on your couch, eating ice cream and watching TV, and you're not making moves and you're not improving your life and making a difference in the world, no one's going to notice you. No one's going to bother you. But the minute you start making a difference, standing up for yourself, stepping out and saying, I want to do something different. You know, Carol, you talked about, they said it's going to take, what it was like 30 different pages of things that had to be completed. The minute you sit up and you say, well, you know what? That's okay. Bring the first page. That's when adversity will show up. And I'm going to tell you, and I think I'm probably older than everyone on this panel, that it has never failed that the bigger the adversity, the bigger the blessing on the other side of it. At the end of my emails, I always say that you got to go the extra mile. You go just one more step, even when you feel like you can't. I mean, we cry all the time, right? We cry when people come against us, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I would say cry through it. Right? Those tears, Kim talked about it, those tears can propel you forward to get through whatever's coming at you. But whenever you're faced with adversity, and if you don't believe me, prove me wrong. Go back and look at some adversity you've ever experienced and look at what came out of it. Like if you were able to push through that adversity and now you look at yourself from the other side, you'd be like, wow, I'll use Kim. They came after her, right? They told her she wasn't going to amount to anything. Look at where she is now. So I think, to me, I think adversity, haters, obstacles, they are all green lights that you're on the path to whatever you're supposed to be doing. And you just got to keep fighting through it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I kind of lived that, like after I left CNN, I kind of had the same thing, and I'm not supposed to talk about it, but we sued them. I left. Whatever, come after me now. I've got more to tell. And
we got her back. And we got her back.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But I often think about I was thinking about like Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, and I feel like they're so much younger than me, and I feel like I learned something because I've been like just powering through, because all of the things that I ever wanted, like you're so true, Kimberly, the adversity and then the best stuff comes after. Like CNN was really some of the worst years of my life, but now my life is like so cool, and like there's so many things coming at me, and I'm taking all of them, and I'm burnt out, but I feel like I need to take all of them, because what happens if I don't?
Yeah.
And but I noticed, when Simone and Naomi were like, you know what, I can't. I gotta take a nap. Like I gotta go take care of my mental health. I have to take care of my physical health. And I'm not gonna do it. And do you guys feel like you ever give yourselves those moments where you're like, I can't, I actually just can't?
I mean, at this stage in my career, yes, I've been doing this for more than 20 years, and I realize that I have a lot of experience and knowledge, and I've also, put in place a plan that would enable me to say no to things, to be able to say, you know what, I'm not going to do that job or work with that person because I just don't want to. But that's been part of a conscious plan to get to this point. But I feel like early on in your career, when you're really trying to build that foundation that's going to enable you to have more agency over your own life, I felt like I really had to suck it up and, and just do a lot of stuff that I didn't necessarily want to do, but I knew that down the road, it would help me. So it was a conscious decision to start building a foundation that would enable me to have more power over what I wanted to do later. And I think that, a lot of it just, I think, depends on where you are in your career. Like just listening to Kim and Nakai talk about like getting into their positions at such a young age, I'm blown away. Like at 18, I wouldn't have known what the hell I was doing. I couldn't even take care of myself. So it's taken a long time to get to a point where I feel like I can play the game of life, like how Kimberly was talking about. But I feel like early on, there's some lessons and some things and some gauntlets you just have to go through to come out the other side and be able to say, you know what, I did that. I'm strong enough. I don't have to do that again now. And I'm never doing that again.
Totally, I agree. And I was going to say, you know what? Say no to building other people's dreams and say yes to building your dreams.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I don't think, I think because I'm starting my own business, I walked away from my corporate career about 6 years ago, and I've been independent in financial services all this time. So I feel like I'm back at the point where I'm rebuilding, right? But to your point, Nakai, I'm building my future versus someone else's business. But this is, I think, Kara, an area where I don't know about other women, but I know for me, I've got to do better. I think as women, we're nurturers. We take care of everybody else. So whether you work for someone else or work for yourself, we give everything. And then when there are people that we're engaged with, whether they're our partners in business or, colleagues, we want them to be good. And we give. And then what's left for us? And, I'm almost talking to myself right now because I know that when I'm talking to people and I'm mentoring them, I always say, when you get on the airplane, right? And they say, oh, when you get on, who do you put the mask on? You put it on you first and then the kid. Because if you do the kid first, the kid can't put the mask on you. They're going to be like, la, 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 and you're going to be gone, right? So it's the same thing for us as women. We've got to find time to nurture ourselves, and our mental health is like so important. I know that, and I'm very comfortable in saying this, that from the beginning of the pandemic up to now, through watching what happened through the pandemic, losing friends and family members, and then watching the whole social unrest and the Black Lives Matter situation, and now what's going on in Afghanistan, there are times for me personally where I literally have got to shut it all off because it's so overwhelming trying to be everything for all people. Simone is like watching what those two young ladies did. That's something I think I need to do at some points in my life. And I think we probably all need to, right?
They gave a master class.
They sure did.
Yeah, when Simone did that, I was like, that girl got to go on tour. They got to go do master class. I mean, that was a master class.
Yeah,
a master class. And when you think about it, the fact that I know, like, even being in business in 2018, I made a pivot in my business that a lot of people didn't understand. I literally said, I'm closing down my brick and mortar store to go get into the tech scene in Austin and Silicon Valley. And I'm gonna go and sort of retreat to learning and upskill, kind of like what Nakai talked about, like skilling yourself up. I had been an entrepreneur for 14 years at the time, but I went off because I was like, I wanna make it easier for women to buy makeup online than it is in person. And everybody was looking like, well, because my store was in the most affluent neighborhood in Houston. So like, you closed down your store to go sell makeup online? What are you talking about? Like they couldn't get it. They didn't know the pandemic was coming, but the good Lord knew. And that's the reason why that voice inside of me told me to make a switch. Okay. And but I'm saying that to say sometimes you make decisions and nobody around you can see the vision or the reason, but they didn't hear the inner voice that you heard. When Simone talked about the reason why, right? She said mentally and physically, I was not aligned. When I knew that I had I had been an entrepreneur for 14 years in business with that brick and mortar, I knew I had took myself as far as I could go. I had took myself to the furthest point I could take myself. At this point, I had to go learn more to go to the next level. But nobody could understand it because on the outside, I looked like I was being successful. And if you get caught up in what you look like, if you believe your own image, you know, like if you let the Instagram fool yourself from what you've been posting, then you know, at some point you got to be self-aware to where you be real with yourself. And I had to be real with myself and say, Kim, you do not know anything else to get you any further in business. So how do you, I had stopped reaching my own dreams. So now I got new dreams. How do I reach those dreams if I don't go out and go learn? So I had to become a student for like almost 2 years. And so I just say that to say at that point, I made that choice. I could have kept going along, right? But then I would have been in a prison, within my own prison of ego and superficialness, because it would have been for the look of it and for the ego of it. And so I must say, you know, what you brought up, Kyla, I mean, that was a master class. And I've seen that in my own life where I had to make that choice. But I also know what it looked like when other people around me were saying, man, why would you do that? That don't, and then they start thinking you're doing bad. They actually offering you $5. They're like, you need something to eat? You all right? You bankrupt? And it's like, but people don't understand sometimes those shifts and those pivots that you make in your life that may not look like success to them, but you know what it is internally to you.
It's true. I took off, I left CNN in 2016. I did not get a full-time job until 2020. And my parents were like, what are you doing? Like, don't worry, I got it. Like, they're like, no, seriously, what are you doing? I was like, trust me, I need this. Like, I need it. And I needed just space to just think, create with no barriers. And it opened in 2020. I got the job that I've always wanted. And like, I get to do all of the things I've ever wanted to do. I get to work in Hollywood. I get to work in journalism. Like, I get to do all the things, but I needed that 5 years where I was like, no, nothing. Sorry, guys. There's actually a question from the audience, and it's, what are the panelists' connections to music? So I guess that means like, is music a part of your life that helps you get through some of this stuff?
Absolutely. Well, I'm gonna jump in there because I love music, passion for music. Actually, I used to do a little producing and writing. It's one of my hobbies. So just having those rhythmic tones, you know, sometimes you just want to have, you know, frequency music just to kind of like even your mind out. Great, you know, instrumentals with different frequency. Like, I don't know if you guys know about like 963 and 728, you know, because I'm a very spiritual person. So I deal in those kinds of frequencies in music. So I love to use that, especially starting the day, along with affirmations. Without music, like life just couldn't exist. Like, I mean, like everything is just created by sound. So I feel like music is such a big part of, you know, the everyday life and of my life, especially. Like, I can't live without music.
Yeah, you know, you said something that kind of stood out to me. Music is a vibration, right? And when you think about our bodies, we all vibrate. I'm going to get a little ethereal here, right? But we all have energy that we give off. You know, you hear people talk about an aura, or, you know what, whenever I'm around Kara, I just feel good, right? That's an energy that we're giving off. And music does that as well. So like Nakai was talking about, for me, music plays a pivotal role as well. And the type of music, so I listen to all kinds of music. I don't do any producing in music. I might dance to it a little bit. My kids, if you ask ask my kids, they'll say I have no rhythm. So maybe I'll just say I only listen, but they don't know what they're talking about. But in any event, music is a big deal for me. I think for me, it really helps to energize me and to bring me down. You know, sometimes during the course of the day, I'm going. And, you know, at the end of the day, I need to bring it down. I just need to recenter, refocus, and just allow my body to relax. And music plays a major role. I'm really into a lot of jazz classics. I grew up on that. So my mother used to listen to Billie Holiday, you know, that whole genre. And it's funny because when I listen to it, my friends are looking at me like, who is that? And what are you listening to? And I'm like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I use music definitely to inspire me when I'm writing something, you know, and to kind of set the tone for creative stuff that I'm working on, but also, you know, to change my mood, like shift my mood, help myself feel empowered, or just get out of a funk if that's the kind of day that I'm having. So definitely music is one of those things where it's kind of magical. You feel like it does things that you can't explain, but you know what's going to help you. So definitely.
Yeah. I must agree. Music, with me growing up playing piano and particularly classical music, I noticed, like, for me, I can listen to classical music and think of some of the best ideas because it just takes me back to a place. Music, you talked about calming you down. Sometimes I do put on my Calm app with my certain musical attributes, and I'll listen to that, and it'll calm me out, mellow me out. Then sometimes, you know, they didn't step to me the wrong way. Then I got to put on, you know, a little Kirk Franklin or something, Yolanda Adams. Somebody got to come do the atmosphere. I'm like,
lay some hands.
Exactly. And then sometimes, you know, I'm like, okay, I got to get hype, right? So then I got to put on, you know, DJ Khaled or somebody, you know, somebody got to come in and get us rocking and remind me I always win and all that, you know, all that right there. You know, like, yeah, music, you know, we can all like put this song track to our life and sort of put it in there and love music. And I mean, just all of that. And I think that music is so powerful because it's able to do that. And it's not even telling you what to do. It's just, it mentally stimulates you in a way that causes those different reactions in even your behavior. Music can do that.
Yeah, I agree. When I was getting ready to go to work at CNN, I would have an at-home playlist on, and then when I hit the streets to go to the subway, it was a completely different playlist, and it was all the things like move, get out of the way, and that kind of like very like. But the one in the morning when I was the one in the morning was usually like, it would start out slow, like 80s rock or like soft rock, and then move a little faster. And then at night I had a playlist for going home, and it was all like mellow, kind of sad stuff. I guess that's how I felt at the end of the day. But music definitely gets me through. So I feel like that was the last question, and I want to thank you guys for this great conversation, and thanks for taking my questions. And you guys just told such amazing stories, and I had a really great time with you.
Thank you for the opportunity to think about all this. This has been really eye-opening, and it's great to, you know, hear all the stories and realize how similar they are. We feel a little less alone in this journey in some ways. So I really appreciate that.
Yes, extremely inspiring, all of your stories. I'm motivated. I'm ready to go now. You know, look out, world, here we come.
Absolutely. Like, thank you so much. Like, Elle, Kara, Kim, your stories were like, I love each part of it. I felt like I saw myself in like each little, some of the stages and the pains. And we take those pains with us. And now that we know that, like, I feel like other women have been through this. Like, I feel so much stronger just being around, such powerful women now. Like, yo, we can do this. We got this.
Yeah, yeah. And shout out to the Passionistas Project for, bringing such the top tier of women together. And Kyra, thank you for such an amazing, being such an amazing moderator. Yeah. And I just want to say, I want to sort of challenge real quick, after listening to what you heard today, step to a Black woman correct. Step to a Black woman correct. And for you understand what's going on, you're hearing it, you're getting some understanding of what's going on and what's happening. And for us to understand that the future is so bright and can be so enriching, and all problems in our world can be solved because we allow all those women to the table. And then for us, the challenge that I want to say, like, for the one that's watching, that's listening, that's not, like, step to that Black woman correct. And then for Black women, any space where you feel like you're the only one, that's it. Take up more space. Widen the net, because it is so pivotal. This world needs healing. And I believe that we are the ones to do it.
That's awesome. I think we can end on there. Like, I can't say anything past that. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Amy and Nancy.